So today I'm going to talk about setting up and presenting the assignment that's due next Wednesday. A couple things. First of all, I want to ask you, if I haven't mentioned this already, remember that your name will always go on top of the half-inch margin in 1/8 inch lettering in the lower right-hand corner. What I'm going to ask you to do is also, after your name, put the numbers 02B. 02B. Because I keep all the assignments filed under these categories, and it will help me to make sure that I don't misplace it. And secondly, when you email me, if you would let me know that you're in section 2, and that way it makes it easy for me to go to Brightspace. I don't have to think, okay, is that morning, afternoon, or evening class? So if you would email me, when you email me, tell me that you're in section 2. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of go over this in general. Notice that there is a mat around this, 3/4 inch mat. Your design is going to be 7 by 7. And the way that we're going to cut the design, the way that I'm going to, or the mat rather, it will automatically give you a 1/4 inch space between your design and the mat. Notice also that the design area, the 7 by 7 design area, is not traced out, or in other words, there's not an outline in ink or anything. That simply where the white is, the white remains. There's no line there. Okay, so it's okay to let the design end and not have a margin where the white is. Okay, in fact, it's the preference. Okay, and then a 1 inch margin from the top. 1/4 inch letter title, which is sun symbol. And when I have the measurements here, and I think I also put them up there on the board. But just to be very clear, your 7 by 7 design area is going to be right in the center. You're going to have a 2 inch margin here and a 2 inch margin here. And I can actually, if you want to snap a picture of this, I can leave it over there, and you can snap a picture when you get a chance. So 2 inch margin here, 2 inch margin here. From the top, go down 3.5 inches, and that will be your top margin. From the bottom, go up 3.5 inches, that will be your bottom margin. As I said, 1 inch and a 1/4 inch. So when you do that, that will automatically give you your 7 by 7 design area. After you have that placed and completed, and you put your 3/4 inch mat on, it will look like this. Okay. So again, that 3.5 inches is not the top of the mat; it's the top of your design area. Okay. Is that clear? Okay. By your deadpan faces, I will assume that is clear. All right. So now, cutting the mat. So a couple things that I definitely want you to take away from this class in general, and today especially. Definitely want you to know how to read a ruler, okay? So that's part of this. I also want you to know how to use this cutter, in particular, well, any cutter like this in particular, and how to cut a straight line. Anybody have trouble cutting a straight line? Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad you raised your hand, because actually a lot of people have trouble cutting a straight line. So I'm going to do my best to give you some hints on how to cut a straight line. Okay, so for any of the designs that you make this semester that will be matting, you're going to cut the paper, the black paper. You're going to add 2 inches to each dimension of the design. So we have a 7 by 7 design. So I'm going to add 2 inches to the 7 and 2 inches to the 7, giving me a 9 by 9. So I'm going to cut a 9 by 9 square out of the black paper for the mat for this 7 by 7 design. If it were a 4 by 6 design, the black paper that I would cut would be 4 plus 2 is 6, and 6 plus 2 is 8. So 6 by 8 for a 4 by 6 design. So do you understand that concept of adding 2 inches in each direction? So 7 by 7 design, 9 by 9 square. So the next thing I'm going to show you is just using this cutter, or a cutter like this. You'll notice at the top that there are inch measurements. The cutting board is divided into half-inch grids. So just keep that in mind. Also, the numbers that are up here, you don't really want to use the numbers and bring your paper all the way up there, because then you're at a really weird angle for bringing this down. So instead, I brought all the numbers down to about the middle. And we're going to use this as a guide. So you don't need to measure your paper before you come to the board, because this is going to do the measurement for you. So I'm going to look at the 9, and I'm going to take my paper, and I'm going to square it off so that the edge of the paper closest to me is lined up on one of those horizontal lines. And then the left-hand side of the paper is right against that line that says 9. And I want to just triple check to make sure that the bottom edge is on a horizontal line and the side edge is on the vertical line. That way I'll be guaranteed to get a square cut. So I'm going to double check it, triple check it. Once I have it in place, then I'm going to hold it in the middle instead of on the edge. If you hold it on the edge, it's going to slip really easily. Bring my blade, get it ready to cut, do one final check, and I can see that I need to adjust it just a little bit. Okay. Alright, so that first cut is the deepest. Okay, so this is scrap which you may be able to use for something else. In fact, I've got a great idea for it. All right, so the next thing, now that you have your 9x9 square for your 7x7 design, is you're going to cut the 3/4 inch mat. So I'm going to show you a couple of things, a couple of ways to approach this. One is that you can obviously use your ruler, and you're going to mark all the way around 3/4 of an inch. If you don't know what 3/4 is, grab me and I will show you. So I'm just measuring 3/4 of an inch all the way around. Now, notice that every time, rather than do this and then kind of do that and that, rather I'm turning my paper. Okay, that way I don't have to contort my body. Also notice that I am standing. And the reason that I'm standing is so that I can be directly above my work and see that my measurements are correct. If you're sitting, it's not as easy to do that. So I recommend that you stand both when you're measuring and when you're cutting for this method. So I've done 3 sides. I will tell you one thing that I do if I'm repeating a measurement over and over again is I'll get like a little strip of paper like this, and I'll mark 3/4 of an inch on the paper, and then I don't have to use the bulky ruler. I can just sort of use this to make my marks. But that's totally up to you. If you just as soon use your ruler, that's fine too. Don't make your marks too big, because I make all of those. My glasses keep fogging up, so I can't really tell completely. No, I've got to do this side. So it's up to you. Sometimes this makes it a little easier, just so that you don't have to look for the 3/4 every time. But really, both are fairly simple. Okay, so I have marked 3/4 of an inch all the way around. The next step is that using those marks, I'm going to put pencil lines all the way from one end to the other. My glasses keep fogging up, so I'll have to stop reading in order to finish this demo. So again, I'm standing over my work so that I can see what I'm doing. It won't be as easy if you're sitting in your chair. You will need your cutting mat to do this. You don't want to cut directly on the table. And if I haven't mentioned it, you also don't want to ever do an assignment using glitter. Okay, just popped into my head. Don't ever do that. Okay. So now that I have all those lines, the reason that I do those lines is so that I know where to start my cut and where to end my cut. If I don't do that and I just use the lines, I don't really know where to start and end my cut. So when you do cut, you want to start a little bit beyond the crosshairs. I'm going to call these intersections crosshairs. You want to start a little bit beyond and go a little bit beyond. Because if you just go to the corner, chances are that it's going to get stuck in that corner. So just move a little bit beyond. And when you mat, using mat board, it's the same thing. You'll always go a little bit beyond and a little bit beyond. So now that I have my marks, I'm going to go ahead and line up my ruler. So using the X-Acto, by the way, I realized, or somebody told me, that in the kits they don't provide these X-Acto knives. So I recommend that you get an X-Acto knife. The ones that you have, the mat knives, are okay, but it's really hard to do like fine cuts and stuff. You can manage this with the utility knives that you have, but certainly, you know, just being a creative person, you probably want one of these anyway, an X-Acto knife. Get the one with the pointy edge, not the rounded edge. So, I hold this like a pencil, and my finger's kind of on the top. When you're holding the utility knife, anybody have one handy? Great. When you're holding the utility knife, you want to hold it, kind of grip it like this, and then put your finger on top, and that will kind of allow you to control it. You don't want to hold it like this or like this, and yeah. So, and you always want to. You always want to pull the blade toward you, no matter what your mother told you about cutting towards yourself. You're going to be cutting toward yourself. You'll have a lot more control. So, a couple things I want you to notice is, again, I'm standing directly over it so I can see where my knife begins and where it ends. I'm also not going to try to cut through the whole thing at once. I'm going to, the first stroke that I make, I'm going to go beyond the line, and I'm going to just kind of do a fairly light stroke that gives me a track for my knife to be in. That way if I slip, I can maybe get it back in that track. And then I'm going to pass through a couple of times until I know that I've cut all the way through. Make sure that it goes. Okay, that's completely separated. So before you remove your ruler, it's a good idea to make sure that you've completely cut through. Because if you remove it and realize, oh, okay, I've still got to cut that area, and you can try to like correct it freehand or even try to get your ruler back in the same place, it's not going to look good. It will probably throw off your straight cut. Okay. So again, the trick is getting your ruler in place. I didn't mention this, but you want to hold your ruler firm. You don't want to hold it just at the top. You want to hold it firm so that it's not going to move. Okay? You don't remove the ruler until your cut is all the way through. Notice that I turned my paper, so I'm not cutting like this. Instead, I'm in a position where I'm still pulling it directly and I can see where my blade is going. Okay, I'm starting a little bit beyond, making a track first, and then just retracing that path. My knife is straight up and down, and I'm kind of resting the blade a little bit on the ruler. Once I know I'm all the way through, then I can go to the next section. Take your time. Try to be a little zen about it and be present for what you're doing. Be mindful of where your blade is. That way you might not cut yourself. Don't hang your fingers over the edge of the ruler. just all helpful hints that I've learned through experience. Okay, so when you're done, it should lift right up. Now, if you're, yeah, okay. If it happens to be stuck in a corner and you pull it, chances are that corner is not going to be clean. If you end up cutting one and it's really not right, do it again. Because you want this to be perfect. You're striving for perfection here. All right, so now my mat is cut. And you can see that the one I had, here we go. You can see that when I place this on this 7x7 design, it will give me a 1/4 of an inch margin all the way around. Okay. So now that's cut. Now, how many people have worked with rubber cement before? Okay. I'm going to tell you the way that, no matter what you've learned, maybe you've learned this way. What you're going to do is you're going to apply the rubber cement to one surface and apply it to the surface you're putting it onto. Let both of them dry, and then you're going to apply it. And then you won't get, and then it will be a real solid application, and you won't get any sort of buckling from the moisture of the rubber cement. So I'm going to take a piece of waste paper, and I'm just going to cut, I don't know, a random piece here. So you'll be going through the process of trying to figure out where you're putting what. Once you've figured out where to place them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out where I'm going to put this. And then once I have it, then I'm going to trace around it. And I'm going to give you a little trick. Sometimes when you're working with these pieces, they look very similar from the front and the back. So you want to make sure you keep track of what the front is, what the side you're gluing down is. So one trick is to get it in place, and then once you know what it is, put an X where you're going to glue down to, and put an X on the side that you're going to glue down. And then once you have that in place, I'm going to just go ahead and put it right in the corner there. You're going to lightly trace it. So I have it traced out so I know where it's going. I know which side I'm gluing because I have an X on it. Then you're going to take the rubber cement. You really don't need a lot of rubber cement, so you don't want to glop this on because it'll get really messy. So you're going to brush off most of the rubber cement. Okay, so there's really just the remnants of it in your brush. And then you're going to brush it on. And try to brush away from the edge so that you don't come back on it and get rubber cement on the side you don't want it. So I'm holding onto it and then finishing it off there. So it's completely covered with a thin layer. Okay. Then I'm going to go to the area where I'm applying it, and with as much control as possible, you're going to go all the way to the edge and get it down there. Okay, so you can see I really didn't use very much. It's very, very sparse application, minimal application, but you definitely want to get the glue completely on. So then you let both of those dry, and let's say that they're both dry. One nice thing about putting on this paper is that now that it's on the paper, I can just kind of bend that and lift it and have it ready. Okay, and then I have my guidelines. Before you let it sit down, make sure that it's exactly in place, because when you use the rubber cement like this, it's going to stay. Okay. So then I would have another clean piece of waste paper, put it over there, and then kind of rub it with my thumbnail, or I have something called a thumb folder, but thumbnail will work. And what that does, it keeps you from getting the black of the paper under your thumb, which will then probably transfer at some point onto your work, and then you can take that off. And if you have any extra, what I find is, like seeping out the sides. What I find is if you take your finger lightly, you might be able to lift it off, but also a kneaded eraser will take it off clean. Okay? Just be ginger about it when you're erasing. Don't give it a lot of pressure because you'll lift up a corner. But now that I've done it this way, it's completely down. Okay? And it's clean. There's no moisture that's going to buckle the paper or anything. So that's how you do that. When you are putting your mat on, you kind of want to do the same thing. You're going to glue one side, and then you're going to glue down here where it is. When I do that, you want to figure out, you're going to, again, stand up and look at your work from above. Once you have it placed, you're going to kind of have to eyeball where your 1/4 inch margin is. And then make a mark at the top with a line. Make a mark at the side with the line. And then when you have everything glued, like I said, once you do it this way, it's a really solid adhesion. So you want to kind of line it up with both of those marks. And then let it lay down. Because you won't be able to adjust it that much after it goes down. Same thing, piece of paper, kind of rub it down. So that everything is solid. A lot of, sometimes students kind of skimp on that step. And so the pieces are kind of, well, they're barely hanging on. And then by the time I get to them, they might have fallen off. So make sure that it's completely adhered and flat. A couple more things about this. If you want to show one piece overlapping the other, like this here, right here. If you just took a piece and laid it over that, it wouldn't be overlapping. It would be sort of creating a new shape, right? Because there's no indication that one is behind the other. So in this assignment, you're not going to be gluing one piece over the other. Instead, you're going to give it the illusion that one piece is overlapping. This is with the black paper because there's no change in value to indicate it. You're going to leave 1/8 inch space between the shapes. Okay? So a couple things that I want you to notice about this. So again, no gluing one piece over the other piece. Okay? One thing I want you to notice about this is that already interesting things are happening with positive and negative space. Right? There's this curved line that's sort of implied to continue going all the way around. There's this sort of 1/4 circle that's there simply because that line of that shape and that line of that shape sort of work together. So by arranging these shapes, and also there's just an implied, even though there's just that shape and that shape, there's sort of this implied oval there. Even though it doesn't extend beyond here, it doesn't extend beyond there, there's really just that line and that line that sort of indicate this oval through the whole design. And that's an example of continuation. Okay? Sort of using just a couple of implied lines to show a larger shape. Okay? So one thing that I found useful in the earlier classes as I was going through people's work was that it's helpful when you're doing sketches to write down at the top of your sketch page continuation, proximity, overlapping, abutting, radial, and grid, and reversal of positive and negative space. And the reason is because it's hard to move from the thumbnails to your larger sketches and move from, a lot of students have like, you know, a guy driving in a car or a field of daisies or something, and it's hard to move from that into sort of an abstract study of positive and negative space. So as I look at your sketches, as I move through and look at your sketches, I'm probably going to ask you to write those things down in your sketchbook. And I would always do that because always the design is about considering the whole design space rather than just the single thing that you're trying to represent. Okay? And probably we'll be able to talk about that more as I look at your designs. Are there any questions about any of that? Okay, great.